We're beginning Chapter 12, Neurontin, an epilepsy drug for everything. Several events in 2004 were a wake-up call for those who still believe the drug industry stands for respectable business. Two of the largest U.S. companies had quite different reputations before the scandals broke loose. Pfizer was considered one of the worst, whereas Merck was known as one of the most ethical drug firms. After 2004, it was hard to tell the difference. The heat was also turned on GlaxoSmithKline in 2004. In 2004, Pfizer agreed to plead guilty to 2 felonies and pay $430 million to settle charges that it fraudulently promoted the epilepsy drug Neurontin gabapentin for unapproved uses. A company whistleblower would receive $27 million. The fine was small, considering that the scales of gabapentin were 2,700 million in 2003 alone, and as about 90% of the sales was for off-label use. The fine would not be expected to have any deterrent effect. Warren Lambert later bought Pfizer, paid doctors to allow salespeople to sit with them as they saw patients, and suggest using Neurontin for a wide array of ailments, including bipolar disorder, pain, migraine, attention deficit disorder, restless leg syndrome, and drug and alcohol withdrawal, although the drug was only approved for treatment-resistant epilepsy. A drug dex, listed no less than 48 off-label uses for Neurontin, and Medicaid was obliged to pay for the drug if being prescribed for one of these uses. Furthermore, the company that owns drug dex sells medical education, a truly incestuous enterprise. The common practice of planting salespeople in doctors' offices is euphemistically called preceptorship, as if the doctor trained the medical student, but a more appropriate term would be a predatorship, as it harms patients. The patients are not always aware that the salespeople isn't a medical student, and not even when they are examined for breast cancer. A company executive told a salesperson, dinner programs, CME programs, consultantships, all work great, but don't forget the one-to-one. That's where we need to be, holding their hand and whistling in their ear. Neurontin for pain, Neurontin for monotherapy, Neurontin for bipolar, Neurontin for everything. I don't want to hear that safety crap. Much of the illegal promotion took place at meetings that were supposed to educate doctors. A physician whistleblower testified that he was trained to distort the scientific evidence, and at some Neurontin meetings, the company paid not only the speakers, but also the listeners, treating them to luxury trips to Hawaii, Florida, or the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. It was very easy to corrupt doctors. Of 40 influential thought leaders identified as potential speakers in northeastern United States, including 26 current or future department chairs, vice chairs, and director of academic clinical programs or divisions. No fewer than 35 participated in company-sponsored activities, and 14 requested or were allocated $10,250 to $158,250 in honoraria or grants. One doctor received almost $308,000 to tout Neurontin at conferences. The speakers were updated on the company's promotional strategies, and Warner Lambert tracked high-volume prescribers and rewarded them as speakers or consultants, or for recruiting patients in studies. Doctors were also paid to lend their names to ghostwritten articles purporting to show that Neurontin worked for unapproved conditions, and a professor requested and received over $300,000 to write a book on epilepsy. It was surely true what was stated in an internal document obtained through U.S. court proceedings. Medical education drives this market. Other internal documents illustrate the extent to which the company was willing to distort the evidence. In relation to the illegal marketing, the company had a publication strategy. The results, if positive, will be published, and I think that we can limit the potential downsides of the 224 study by delaying the publication for as long as possible. The manipulations also involved selective statistical analyses, selective reporting of outcomes that happen to show a positive effect, inappropriate exclusion or inclusion of patients in the analyses, multiple publication of desirable results, differential citation of Pfizer results, and spin to make negative results appear positive. The bias was already introduced at the design stage. For example, high doses were used that led to unbinding and biased reporting of subjective outcomes. Pfizer even recognized that unblinding due to adverse events could result in corruption of the study's validity. The final layer of corruption of the evidence was accomplished by ghostwriters. We would need to have editorial control. We are using a medical agency to put the paper together, which we will show to Dr. Reckless. We are not allowing him to write it up himself. The doctor's name was actually Reckless. And we know Allison wants to make sure that we align publication messages with your global marketing efforts. A medical writer asked Pfizer, "How do we make it sound better than it looks on the graphs?" Kay Dickerson, director of the Cochrane Center, uncovered all this and summarized what she felt about it. Outright deception of the biomedical community, highly unethical, harmful to science, wasteful of public resources, and potentially dangerous to the public's health. As with all the trials I reviewed, selective analyses could explain any positive findings observed. Pfizer was unsure how it should tackle requests from Cochrane researchers about getting access to unpublished data, and a previous case explained Pfizer's dilemma. As explained in Chapter 6, Pfizer got bad publicity in 1999 when my wife and I described in JAMA how the company had rigged a series of trials, its antifungal drug, fluconazole, and refused to provide us with the data we needed to sort things out. Even after JAMA's deputy editor had urged the company to reply, Pfizer refused to respond to simple and pertinent questions. The story made front-page news in the New York Times. Shortly afterwards, the founder of the Cochrane collaboration, Ian Chambers, told me he was visited by a director from Pfizer UK and wanted to show him how easy it is to search in the Cochrane library. He typed Pfizer, which brought him to the discussions section of our Cochrane review on fluconazole, where we wrote, "We experienced unexpected difficulties in obtaining responses to our requests for additional or clarifying information about the trials. We did not succeed to get any information from the investigators or Pfizer, the manufacturer of fluconazole, on the most pertinent issues: why oral amphotericin B was used, why the results for this drug were lumped together with those of an ineffective drug, and whether there was overlap between different trials reports." Funny what words I mess up. Our paper and the media attention gave Pfizer something to think about, which was revealed 2 years later when its vice president for research responded to another Cochrane request by providing a list of references which was entirely unhelpful. The internal deliberations were interesting. I would not send unpublished data to anyone outside Pfizer. The decision is ultimately yours. The risk is that in the Cochrane review, there is a statement saying Pfizer declined to provide the information requested, which does not look good for the company. 3 years later, the Cochrane Group again reminded Pfizer of its request, but in vain. The Cochrane protocol was eventually withdrawn, and the review was never completed. In relation to another Cochrane review, Pfizer stated, "We definitely will not supply any internal data. We all agree on that." It is indisputable that the illegal and fraudulent promotion, which was approved by some of the company's top executives, led to harm. An internal memorandum showed that doctors who attended dinners given by the company to discuss unapproved uses of Neurontin wrote 70% more prescriptions for the drug than those who didn't attend. The company even insisted on pressing doctors to use much higher doses of Neurontin than those that had been approved, which means higher income for more harm. A seeding trial. The STEPS study, which had no control group, had the marketing objective to increase the dose of Neurontin and its market share, and it involved 772 physicians who only treated 4 patients each on average. Physicians with little or no experience in trials were recruited, and the drug and the data were very dirty, which the 2 published papers said nothing about. Drug salespeople collected data and were directly involved in suggesting to the doctors which patients to enroll while being present in the doctor's offices. The trial was deeply unethical, as the patients were not informed about the true marketing purpose of the study, and as the doctors were the actual study subjects without knowing this, as the effect of their participation on sales was closely monitored. Off-label promotion exposes patients to harms with no assurance of benefit. This criminal activity has increased, and its victims have died, suffering heart attacks and strokes, and permanent nerve damage, and lost their eyesight. In 2010, a jury found that Pfizer violated the Federal Racketeer Influence and Corruption Organization Act, RICO, wow, and the company was to pay a pittance of $142 million in damages. The jury found Pfizer engaged in a racketeering conspiracy over a 10-year period. Pfizer never told doctors or patients that its studies had shown that Neurontin was no more effective than a placebo for some of its off-label uses. They gave that shit to me for off-label use. And I told them, like, I'm hallucinating over here, and they're like, I don't know why. Anyways, chapter 12. Next time.